There are countless bottles that trade on the secondary for prices above the SRP. Which bottles do we think are actually worth more than their retail value? If you want to find out, then stick around. To thank our patrons. Without them, this podcast would not be possible. Yep. So really, we ran the numbers last year with everything that was going on in all our businesses. We could not have kept this channel going without the support of the patrons. And we have to thank you. And everybody whose names are on the screen are top level contributors. And we doubly thank you. Thank you so much for all the support. Now, let's talk about disclaimers.
Okay.
So some bottles we wouldn't pay over retail for.
Sure.
Right. So this is part of a 3-part series.
Sure.
One part was bottles that are not worth their like SRP.
Right.
Another was we're happy with these bottles at SRP, but wouldn't pay over, wouldn't chase them. This one is the bottles that we actually would pay above SRP.
Yeah.
Right. And we have to realize that, everybody's palates are different. And sometimes this equation that you run in your mind can be influenced by other factors. So what we are trying to focus on, because there are some bottles that I will buy because they're rare, simply because they have value outside of their flavor, right? Because what do we do with our rare bottles?
We don't drink them.
And who does?
Everyone else.
And so if you run kind of a library for people to have whiskey experiences, you might buy bottles that you're not going to like because they're rare and people are excited to be able to try them. But you're buying them for a different reason than their value based on flavor. So these recommendations are all based exclusively on flavor. Try not to get upset. Everyone's equation's a little bit different depending on what your financial situation is.
Your palate,
and try to stick around for the conclusion portion of this video so that you understand why we put these bottles in this category. Okay, so let's start off with some bottles. What is the first? And by the way, there's no particular order, and we're going to kind of go over categories because we found that when we liked one, there were other SKUs from that same producer that have the same value characteristics. And so we're going to kind of talk about categories. There's going to be 5. So what's the first one?
All Jack Daniel's limited edition.
Yes, Jack Daniel's limited editions have been crushing it.
I love Jack Daniel's.
So they released the Coy Hill, which was a particular aging facility, an aging warehouse. So it's similar to the Russell's Reserve single rick house, the Coy Hill was. Many of them were hazmat. But the single rick house from Russell's Reserve was $2.99. Coy Hill was $69.99. Then they released the 10-year, which is $69.99, and the 12-year, which is only $79.99. The twice-barreled, which was $74.99. And so we're talking some pretty major value in some limited edition whiskeys. Yeah. One of the historical facts about Jack Daniel's is it popularized the filtration process, the charcoal filtration process that is called the Lincoln County process. And it became kind of the standard for the state of Tennessee, partially because it was promoted by Jack Daniel's. There's a state pride, but what a lot of people don't know is that probably the reason why huge Jack Daniel's supporters hate the idea of calling it bourbon, even though it is 100% legally bourbon, and they may not even know this, is because Jack Daniel's father died in the Civil War. And part of the way through the Civil War, Kentucky switched sides from fighting from the South to the North. So Jack Daniel's, having lost his father, didn't get along with his mother or his stepmother. He left home at 7 years old to make his own way in life because his dad died in the war. And Jack Daniel's associated part of, the cause of the downfall of his family with Kentucky switching sides. And so he didn't want to be associated with bourbon. And that's part of the reason why they fought so hard to have their own category of whiskey.
Wow.
Okay. So the next category would be high proof, Buffalo Trace Mashbill 1 products.
Okay.
And so what is my favorite whiskey of all time?
Is it George T. Stagg?
George T. Stagg. And do you know what the SRP for that is?
$119.99?
Yeah, $119.99. And do you know how much you normally have to pay for that bottle on the secondary?
$1 kajillion.
$1 kajillion. No, I think it's gotten down to around $850 or something like that.
Bless America.
But it's still expensive. And then it has a little brother that used to be Stagg Jr., but now it's just called Stagg. I don't have any of the Stagg bottles yet. I still have all the junior bottles.
Yeah.
But so Stagg, and do you know what its SRP is?
$69.99.
$69.99. And then they also make from that same mash bill E.H. Taylor Barrel Proof, which is also an SRP of $69.99. And then maybe the greatest value in whiskey is Benchmark Full Proof, which it's not a cask strength like the other three. So the George T. Stagg, the Stagg, and the E.H. Taylor Barrel Proof are all cask strength, but the benchmark is 125, so it's up there. And it's only $21.99. And so all four of these Buffalo Trace Mashbill 1 high proof offerings, the difference between them is age. And I think every one of them are probably worth more than retail. And the only one that's really easy to find in that list is the Benchmark Full Proof.
Sure.
And the fact that people will line up and chase trucks to get Buffalo Trace, regular 90 proof Buffalo Trace bourbon, and the store that they're going into to get the Buffalo Trace bourbon has Benchmark Full Proof on the shelf for $21.99 and they're passing it up, is just a testament to the fact that people don't know about this whiskey because it's effectively the same thing. It might be a little bit younger, but not much. But it's way higher proof and it's also cheaper per bottle. So historical fact, E.H. Taylor, the founder of E.H. Taylor, originally was associated with what is now the Buffalo Trace Distillery. But back then it was the old fired copper distillery, OFC. And he was part owner with George T. Stagg, the namesake of my favorite whiskey, and they could not get along. And so after a battle, and E.H. Taylor fled to Europe for a while to avoid debtor's prison, he came back and started the old Taylor Distillery down the street from Buffalo Trace, and it has now been restored as Castle and Key, and you have been there.
I love it.
Yes, it is
so pretty.
It's a beautiful distillery, and you can see why George T. Stagg and E.H. Taylor did not get along when you visit Castle and Key, because E.H. Taylor did not give an F about budgets. All he cared about was aesthetic beauty and spending money on things that he thought were important, and he would spend a ridiculous amount of money on something that made no difference in the long run, and GTS was not down with that, so they were never going to be good friends.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of What You Have on Your E-commerce site. I'm your host, Randy Sullivan. Let's get right to the questions. Do you have Glen toppers? Yes. Do you have t-shirts? Yes. Do you have bottle carrying bags? Yes. Do you have storage? Yes. Do you have an aroma kit? Yes. People, we have everything at bourbonrealtalk.com. This is stupid. Why do we even need a game show? What's next on the list?
High proof Buffalo Trace weeded mash bills.
Yeah, so Buffalo Trace has several different bourbon mash bills, and kind of in the disclosure category, since Buffalo Trace makes all of the most sought after whiskeys, if you're going to do a video about whiskeys that are undervalued by retail, it's likely you're going to have a lot of Buffalo Trace products on there, but there's a very good reason for it, and that's why I want you to stick around for the conclusion section, because I'm going to explain why it's that way, okay? So Buffalo Trace weeded bourbons, the ones that I truly love, are the Weller Full Proof and the William LaRue Weller, which sadly our bottle is empty. Womp womp. That one's so hard to find, even I can't get it.
That was just hard for me to say. I'm glad you were in charge of that, because I always
remember that year that you got me a bottle and I lost my mind?
Yeah, it was an accident.
Yeah.
It was like I walked into a liquor store and I was like, I'm looking for a present. Like, the
No.
stereotypical thing. Yes.
No.
Yes, that's the year that
You
I
won
walked.
the lottery. The store manager asked me when I went in the store if he could get me a second allocated bottle, what it would be. He had not told you had won yet.
No, isn't this the one that comes in the paper, though? I got you one wrapped in a paper, and it was like... I'm going to stand here and be this guy that doesn't remember history. It's fine. Okay.
Okay. So, Buffalo Trace.
Yeah.
Weeded mash bill. Historical facts. So this mash bill was the brainchild of Julian Van Winkle, who ran the Stitzelweller distillery.
Okay.
And he used wheat to create a softer version of bourbon because most bourbons have rye as their flavor grain. And their products, over time, eventually became what we know today as Pappy Van Winkle. So his grandson built up the Van Winkle line by buying old barrels from the distillery that his family once owned and lost ownership of. And he was bottling whiskey that his family had made, popularized the brand, and then eventually the family distillery closed down, and he ended up forming a relationship with Buffalo Trace to continue production. And the site of the original Stitzelweller is where the Bullet Distillery is now. So little historical facts for you. All right, what's next on the list, Pretty Girl?
Four Roses limited edition. Is that what you're drinking? What are you drinking?
Well, I'm drinking the Benchmark because we don't drink our allocated bottles. So yes, Four Roses limited edition. Four Roses, a distillery we've had some really great experiences at. And in fact, this year, I think this is, I don't know what year this is.
2019.
Oh, okay. Well, when we went there with Wes, we were in the sensory room where they had the component bottles that they were using to blend the Four Roses limited edition, I think for the 2022 release. And it's only $199.99, which is kind of a lot, but this is one that I would actually pay more than that to get a bottle if I didn't have access, because it's one of my favorites. It's so good. But historically, nobody really knows why it's called Four Roses, because the website has a story that's probably inaccurate. So the original founder's name was Paul Jones Jr., and it tells the story about him proposing to a young lady, marriage, and she said that she would answer by attending like a social event that they were going to, and if she had a corsage of four roses when she got there, that would mean yes. And so the story is she wore the corsage of four roses, and he was so excited that she said yes to his proposal that he named his distillery the Four Roses Distillery. One small problem with that, Paul died never having been married. And so what is actually a more likely explanation was there was a Victorian era style of business communication where when somebody made a business proposal, you would send one rose back to recognize receipt. You would send 2 roses back to decline the proposal, 3 to say you needed more time, and 4 to say that you accepted. And so it's more likely that he named it Four Roses Bourbon because that is the whiskey you would drink to celebrate a successful business venture. But it did become the #1 bourbon in the United States, and a lot of people don't know that. It was the #1 bourbon post-Prohibition until the end of the 1950s when Samuel Bonfman, who owned Seagram's from Canada, and he also owned the Four Roses brand, decided to kill the sales of Four Roses in the United States, damaging his own company that he owned so that he could make his Canadian whiskey the #1 seller in the U.S. And we didn't get the right to buy Four Roses in the United States back until the 1990s. So, let's see. The next category would be high proof Buffalo Trace Mashbill 2.
Okay.
And so that's going to be things like Blanton's Gold, Blanton's Straight from the Barrel. They're really good products. The Blanton's Gold SRP is $104.99. SRP for Blanton Straight from the Barrel is $149.99. So kind of the historical facts behind this bottle are that they're all aged in warehouse H. So if you go to Buffalo Trace, all the warehouses are made from brick except for one that's ironclad, and that was a warehouse they threw up right after Prohibition because they needed more aging facilities to get caught up with demand. And so they built one ironclad building, and they discovered that because it wasn't as insulated, that the barrels aged slightly faster there and were producing some different flavors. And eventually they decided to take advantage of that fact and to release single barrels that had more barrel flavor imparted into the whiskey in a shorter period of time. But at this point, the Warehouse H doesn't have the capacity to support the Blanton's sales, and so it is a public secret that all barrels spend some time in Warehouse H, but not their entire aging life, which is what the general public believes that it is. And so it is an undisclosed amount of time in Warehouse H. So as far as we know, some of those barrels are just being rolled through on their way to the bottling line.
Like introduction.
Just a little introduction. So in conclusion, Buffalo Trace obviously had a huge, influence on this list, and a lot of people get mad at us whenever we talk so much about Buffalo Trace. But it is part of the zeitgeist, and that's because they do produce a lot of the most sought after whiskeys, and they are one of the only distilleries to not drastically increase their prices to something that's closer to market value. And the reason why they haven't done that is because a few years ago they spent $1.2 billion expanding the distillery. And so other distilleries like Heaven Hill and Jim Beam and Wild Turkey, they didn't have to account for a bunch of new inventory coming into the market. So they were able to adjust their prices to be more in alignment with what the true market value was. And so that's why you see, the Russell's Reserve single rickhouse coming out at $2.99. Buffalo Trace could for sure sell some of their products at those higher prices, but it would kill demand for the future whenever more bottles showed up because they just borrowed $1.2 billion. And so that's why Buffalo Trace is the way that they are. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. So let's give away some whiskey.
Let's do it.
What do you think we should give away this time? It's going to be epic because these are some epic bottles.
It is some epic bottles. We should do a 1 ounce sample pack.
Okay.
We should throw in the Jack Daniel's 10-year.
Okay.
H. Taylor barrel proof. Maybe the Weller full proof.
Yep.
I keep looking around like I'm trying to.
I'd love to give you William LaRue, but as you can see, the bottle's empty. Yeah.
4 Roses limited edition. And the Blanton straight from the barrel.
Yep. So that's going to be a pretty epic sample set. All you have to do to enter to win that is like this video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell. And you do want to do that because you'll be notified of future videos and giveaways, because we do a giveaway in every video. And you have to fill out the web form by clicking the link in the video description below. That's going to give us your basic information. We run a randomizer, publicly post who the winner is, reach out to the winner, get your shipping details, and send you your samples absolutely for free. And tell them how they can support the channel.
We can start with Patreon. Okay. We've got lots of different tiers for every budget, but we've got some really amazing member benefits, bonus content, distillery takeovers, like barrel picks, huge discounts on
merchandise
merch and stuff. Yeah, lots of good stuff.
There's so much going on in there. Plus, there's the level for every budget, and you do get the benefit of knowing you support the channel and its mission. But you can also support us by purchasing merch.
Yeah.
So how would they do that?
We had merch before we had anything else. So at bourbonrealtalk.com, we've got t-shirts and glasses and all kinds of whiskey goodies, kind of created by whiskey people for whiskey people.
Yeah, so this is stuff that you need if you're a real enthusiast, right? Because I just think about what I need, and then I go to her and I go, can you make this a thing? And then she just...
And I have a magic wand, and
and then it shows up. So you need bottle carrying bags and lanyards and glass holders that keep your glasses from breaking when you're traveling, and aroma kits to develop your senses. We have all that there.
All the things.
And also, this channel's been subsidized by my real estate business since its inception. I do residential real estate in the Dallas and Houston metro areas. So if you need a residential real estate agent, you can show support by reaching out to me and interviewing me for that position. I will warn you, though, that if you end up hiring me, I will be giving you an epic bottle of whiskey as a closing gift. So if this is your first time tuning into the channel, I'd love to tell you about our show philosophy. We are all about bringing people together around whiskey. And that's because I lost my younger brother to suicide in 2015. And in the aftermath of that, Lindsay and I struggled to try and find a way to give back to help prevent others from facing that same fate. And we ended up kind of making our own way. And it was unorthodox, but I saw how whiskey was bringing people together. And I saw how my brother had lost a lot of the social connections that helped him stay anchored to this world. And I thought, maybe I can use whiskey to help create social connections so other people don't have to feel the way that my brother did. And so we started this channel. And if you're going to have social connections, you also need a forum. And so eventually we started a forum for the viewers of this channel called Bourbon Real Talk Community. And it's a free Facebook-based whiskey forum where there is no negativity. Everything is positive. Lots of connection going on in there. A lot of sharing, a lot of information sharing, coordination of in-person events. Great things going on there. Lifelong friendships being formed there. And part of the reason why that's possible is because we don't allow the whiskey trolls in there. And whiskey trolls are basically just hateful people online that say hateful things to strangers. And we had to keep them out of Bourbon Real Talk Community, but they also taught us another valuable lesson, and that is that if those individuals out there can hate you online even though they don't know you, there's nothing that keeps us from loving you online even though we don't really know you. And that's why we end every episode the same way, and that's this. If you woke up this morning and you're unsure whether or not anyone loved you, just know that we love you. We'll see you next time on Bourbon Real Talk. Cheers.
What are you doing?
Oh, I'm testing my new whiskey glass that I had designed.
Why?
Well, there's a company out there that's a real Karen, and she threatened to sue us.
Really? You don't say.
Yeah, so we had been producing some traditional tulip-shaped whiskey glasses.
Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
We never used the name.
Right, of course.
But they claimed to own the shape of the glass. Mm-hmm. And since I'm just a little guy, I couldn't fight.
Right.
But do you know what that motivated us to do, Wes?
What?
To go out and design a glass that was actually made for high-proof American spirits. So the company that had the problem with us, their glass was originally designed for low-proof Scotch whiskey.
Oh, okay.
80, 86 proof, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. And you know what I had noticed? Every time I would nose a really high-proof, high-quality spirit in the United States out of this glass, all I got was ethanol burn.
Yeah, a little burn there. I felt that.
And so we went out and we designed this glass that's actually designed for those higher-proof spirits. And I'm so confident in this glass that if anybody were to go to our website and buy one, I'm offering a money-back guarantee.
Wow.
If you get that glass to your house and you find yourself one of these traditional tulip-shaped glasses and you nose a high-proof spirit side by side and you can't tell the difference, I will gladly give you your money back.
So what you're saying is they can really stick it to the Karen and support the little guy by going to bourbonrealtalk.com and ordering one of these with absolutely no risk. They could get their money back if they don't prefer it nosing it to the other?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And if you love small business and you like sticking it to Karens, that's the way to go.
Stick it to Karen. bourbonrealtalk.com.
Cheers.